Thanks so much for having me. So I do hope you will have questions, those of you in the audience, so that we can make sure that I'm getting all of those answered. But I'm going to start with some generalities and then we can have a discussion at the end. So this is very much a different time, right? And in many ways, the thing that we have to our advantage over the 1918 Spanish flu, the last pandemic to really hit nationwide here in the US, is that we now have these amazing things and can do things like webinars and connect with people online. Many of us are able to do our work this way. And then, of course, there's schooling. So, it's an advantage that we have. It's also kind of an issue. So when I say my son is a freshman at East, he's really in the version of East High School that is taking place in our basement. And I'm sure that is happening to many of you as well. One of the things, though, that outside of school, that the computers or technology phones can be really helpful with is kind of keeping up that social connection. So we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. There are a few risks that are going along with this virtual world as well. One of the things I'm recommending to parents of younger kids is that you want to be careful with the TV news. Can be kind of overwhelming, and there's a lot going on, not on the pandemic. And the more kind of exposure that kids are getting with live news, that can really increase their anxiety or feeling unsafe, which we all, of course, are feeling ourselves sometimes too. One of the other things I ask parents when they are asking me about how to manage technology in their homes is, to make sure that as parents, we are doing some healthy modeling. And that we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but that is kind of the first thing. Our kids are really going to do as I do and not necessarily do as I say. So I think that's something for us to really have for self-reflection. Eye strain is probably something that if it's an issue for you or for your kids, you've already figured that out, being on the computer all of the time. And then I'm going to talk to you pretty specifically about virtual overload, because it can be a real issue. But first, a short video. This has been one of my anthems ever since the quarantine started back in the spring, and it makes me laugh. I hope it makes you laugh too. If you don't like it, that's okay. It's not very long.
I don't know what day of the week it is. Yeah. Is it Monday? I don't know. Is it Tuesday? I don't know. Maybe Sunday? I don't know. Every day feels the same. Every day feels the same.
I think it's Thursday.
Shut your mouth. It all feels the same. It all feels the same. I don't know what to do. So I'll just eat some snacks, get real fat, and stay in my room.
I keep hoping that I'm going to get to the point where I can remember firmly in my head what day it is, but I'm messing up the days of the week. I'm messing up what week it is in the month, and I'm also messing up the month. So it's even kind of beyond this now that I have to sometimes look at a calendar to figure out, where I am in the world. Sorry. And then there's an extra challenge for those of us who are working from home as parents. And this is a picture of kind of what it looks like in the ideal, or sometimes what our bosses are hoping it looks like for us at home. And this is more of the reality. So this is a real live colleague and friend of mine. Her kids are also in DPS, and this is her trying to have a meeting for work. And they're really cute kids, but even when they are as well behaved and snuggly as these kids, it can be a real stress for moms and dads who are trying to work to also manage with their kids. So this isn't.
Okay, before we really get started though, I want to do a quick kind of pandemic reality check.
Sorry, that's me talking.
Okay, before we really get started though, I want to
Sorry.
do a quick kind of pandemic reality check. I've been asked this question a lot. Like, how do you balance?
So sorry. That was from a
One of the
recorded
things I
talk,
wanted to
obviously.
to you all about.
So when you're trying to balance working from home and teaching your kid who is doing virtual school and also being a full-time parent, I am hearing from many parents about the impossible nature of this expectation, and you just really can't do it. And if you are working from home as well, then you are possibly, at least this is very true for me, experiencing some Zoom fatigue. And this can really happen with our kids as well. So by the end of the day, like, I don't want to have happy hours with my friends or family in other places. I'm just kind of tired of being on the computer after 9 hours of Zoom meetings and webinars. And I see patients online now as well, which is, again, a great gift, but it does put a strain. So when you're thinking about your kids, this is a question that I pose to my son, who is a freshman. And I was asking him, how many of these online platforms does he have to navigate for school? And it's just, I was having a hard time doing webinars and news interviews and work and seeing patients, and they are working with my research teams who are around the country, and it's just I'm having to learn new methodologies for connecting. Like sometimes it's a Google Meet, and sometimes it's Teams, and sometimes it's WebEx, and sometimes it's Zoom. And that can be exhausting for me, and I'm a grown up most days. And so I was wondering for him, like, is everything kind of integrated for him school wise? And you can see here, like, it's really not. And for him, this can be one of the things that can really give this risk for disorganization and a need for accommodations at school. And the schools haven't always really kind of caught up with that. So then we also have this issue of Zoom fatigue in general. One of the things that can be the most difficult is watching, having this huge mirror in front of our kids when they are in school. So that's not something that they're used to, needing to process at the same time when they're also trying to learn. And that can be a huge distractor from learning. Is, oh, what do I look like? What do my friends look like? What are they doing? Where's their house? What does their cat look like? So one of the things that I have been recommending to parents and especially to teachers is to kind of work on these. These are actually also things that I use at work at our meetings as well. But to incorporate these things into online learning, and sometimes it needs to come from the parents, especially of younger kids who just can't work for that long. My son's school, I know this is not true of all of the DPS high schools, but they switched this year because of COVID to a quarter system instead of a semester system. So they are doing only 4 classes at a time, which is great because it's just less to manage. In the first quarter, my son had to have his camera on in order to get participation credit. And he was having a hard time in some of the platforms with hiding that self view. And it was really draining and hard for him. And somehow this quarter, none of his teachers are requiring them to have their cameras on, which is also can be an access issue anyway. I think what we can do also as parents is to talk about not multitasking. So the amount of kind of overwhelm and strain, even if you're doing something like texting somebody, you know, in the family supportively or playing a mindless game on your phone, still when you are dividing that attention, that creates an extra strain. And it's very true of your kids as well. So I would encourage them while they're doing kind of the online school to put their phones down and use them during the breaks instead, unless of course they're being required for school too. Another one of the questions that I'm getting really frequently from parents is, should I be limiting screen time, particularly in the time of COVID? And this is a tough question because all of us right now, all across the country, are getting a lot more screen time. And I think we need to kind of approach it realistically, that we can't really limit screen time because it is the only way for when virtual schooling is happening for kids to be in school. It can also be one of the safest ways for them to connect socially. So that it's hard to talk about setting limits. So one of the things I talk about with my patients or when I'm doing talks like this is kind of taking the long view with screen time. So myself as a parent, my youngest son is the last. Now we have 4 kids altogether. I have 3 grandkids. I saw before my kids got old enough to even be using technology, I saw a difficulty with kids, family, friends, and patients going off to college and or off to jobs, launching from the household and having trouble regulating their own screen time. And it was more of a problem for people who had had a lot of regulations around, a lot of rules around that screen time when they were at home. So I would say if it is possible, especially during a pandemic, don't limit the screen time and let your kids figure out how to manage it themselves. That's really the ideal. And this is a better time for them to learn how to do it. Really, no matter what age they are, if they're, at least in middle school or high school, then later when they're fully grown. So I like to give that recommendation, but then there's also the recognition that some kids just really can't limit themselves and make sure they get everything done. So in that case, you may need to give a little bit more support. I think one of the important things is to take a kind of a holistic look at your child and see if the screen time is causing any difficulty. Like, are they still getting enough sleep, exercise? Are they spending time with you as a family? Are they having any no screen time at all? Are they using it to keep in touch with their friends? and thinking about how we are all integrating technology into our lives, and and so much more. One of the things I would just say, if you are finding that you need to limit screen time, I would, try not to cut it off completely outside of school. And of course, school screen time doesn't count. Um, if your kids are using screens, I would emphasize using that screen time to make social connections. It is a way for them to get to still see their friends and talk to their friends. If you have a computer or even phone available. And I have generally suggest just figuring out what your kids are doing online, not by spying on them, but just showing interest. They really like that kind of attention. And as you're watching them play the games, you'll learn a lot about the games, and be able to there kind of figure out whether you think there's a difficulty or a problem going on there. And I think, just in general, this isn't only with, in the time of COVID, not only with screen time, it is with really everything. Parents really need to be kind to themselves. It is really hard to be able to manage now in the way things are going. And unfortunately, this second wave is worse than the first in many ways. So this is really, it's a marathon, and we have to pay most attention to just keeping those relationships with our kids and with our family, and thinking less about rules or things that are impossible to control during a pandemic. For that, I'm going to turn to Elmo's dad for a little bit of advice, and he's going to have you take a deep breath, and you'll see I'm going to do it with him too, because I think it's really helpful.
Hey there, it's me, Louie. I just wanted to say.
Can you help Elmo make a pillow fort,
Just a second, Elmo. I'll be right there, son. It is wonderful to get to spend so much time with our children, but can also be a bit overwhelming. But I just wanted to say, parents, you are doing an amazing job. Remember, though, it's important to take some time for yourself. Take care of you. You can listen to your favorite song, stretch, or just take a moment to breathe. Come on, breathe with me right now. Huh? Take a slow, deep breath in, and then breathe out. It feels good, huh? We are all doing the best we can, and that is okay. No, it's better than okay. It's okay, son. I'm coming. Looks like I have to go. Time to make a pillow fort. You hang in there and keep up the great work.
caring for each other?
So I think he gives really great advice. Always Sesame Street gives great advice. And I feel like it really applies to us no matter what stage our kids are in. So my older kids and my two stepkids, they're all grown-ups. My son's in his last year of college. My older kids are well past that at this point, but they all have more needs now too, as do I. So I keep Elmo's dad in mind as much as I can. They're not wanting to build pillow forts anymore, but it's the same kind of feeling, kind of pulled in these different directions. And we are all doing the best that we can. One of the other things that I do in my professional life at Children's is I'm the faculty mentor for our Youth Action Board. And earlier in the pandemic, they wrote some recommendations for parents, and I'm just sharing them with you here. Um, they are asking for kind of a little bit of a different way of parenting. They say, like, help us form a healthy routine, even if we seem like we don't want it and we resist it, we still need that anyway. You know, make a little bit of special time for us. And one of the things that I thought was really powerful was they were asking for encouragement instead of punishment, particularly around school. So a lot of our teens might lose their phone for bad grades or that kind of thing. And you know, the demands of hybrid or online learning or pandemic learning in general, even if your kids are in school, it's just harder. So they recommend kind of steering away from punishment, particularly things like losing access to technology, and they want their parents to provide encouragement instead of punishment. And they also recommend that parents check in more frequently about their kids' mental health. And so this is how they are asking parents to talk to them and all of your kids. One of the things that I really like about these questions is they are a little more positive than they are negative. So we don't need to approach them and assume, you know, only doom and gloom. And I like that, you know, many of these are kind of proactive kinds of questions. One of the things that I'm hearing from my patients and my own kids is that you know, it's generally not very hard to pull them away from screens, particularly if they're not playing online with their friends or with each other, which they do as well. Because they really, you know, this has been going on for a long time. So they're pretty eager to be doing other things and to think about other healthy ways to manage in the pandemic. Now I'm going to cover a couple of technology resources, and you'll see that I think all of them, or maybe almost all of them, are from Common Sense Media. And if that is not a place that you have been yet as a parent wondering about technology, I definitely recommend it. I'm going to show you a couple of resources. This is a podcast specifically created for parents during the time of COVID. And I think they're pretty, you know, they're amazing. And if I don't answer some of your questions, then it's pretty likely that the answers are going to be found here. They also have open school resources. So these are great because they're tailored specifically to kids' ages, and there's a mix of online things, video things, and activities to do as a family or for your kids to do on their own. And that is, you know, really helpful to have these kinds of resources. And they really offer even these more comprehensive all-day plans for what is available. And these are, you know, there's some of them are really pretty good. The difficulty can be with the younger kids, of course, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, they need a lot more support to do online learning, although kids have also made a lot of progress since the pandemic started. You can also use Common Sense Media to see what's safe. and it can be helpful. They have, they have reviewed them, and you can see how the different movies or video games or social media apps, how they align with your parent values, your family values. And that's really helpful. You don't have to kind of go out and do that research yourself. And if you're going to connect with your kids, and you want to like try playing a game with them, or do something online with them to kind of try to enter their world now. There are also some guides for the really popular ones. So for example, this is a parent's guide to Minecraft. And this is not so you would teach your child how to play Minecraft, right? But guide for you as a parent. And it's really kind of wonderful in that way. So all of the questions that you have about safety and what's happening in these games, you can generally find here on Common Sense Media. It's also can be great just to ask your kids to teach you. It's a wonderful way for them to feel like the experts, which honestly, they are the experts. And can be a way for you to kind of be included then in their interests, which is great. Some of you may even already be certainly proficient at Minecraft. I am not, but there are also other games that you can play that are mostly listed in Common Sense Media, but this is one that has been particularly captivating for our family, GeoGuessr. If maybe you've heard of it or you've played it, and there are different things you can do in here. The ones that we like is kind of like a where in the world is this photo. And it's nice to kind of look for clues, and you can move around on the map, the real live, Google Earth map, I think it's from, and try to figure out together where things are. And I think kind of putting a focus on the positives and the gifts of technology in the pandemic is a really great thing. One of the other things my sons do is a game called Among Us, and you've probably heard of that if you have kids, which you all do. And they play that. My younger son plays that with my older son and some of his college friends, and then some of my younger son's friends, and they play together. And it is a way to connect with people online in a fun game. I've heard some teachers have also been playing those kinds of games with their students. So the big picture, and this is really just to kind of do what I promised, is that really, if I had you here in person, I would hand out a get out of guilt free card, kind of along the lines of the Monopoly get out of jail free card. It is a tough time, and it is a particularly tough time to be limiting or struggling with technology issues. Because you are on a webinar, I am not talking much about the resources that are out there to support students in their online schooling or getting connected. I do know like Comcast has a program that will give high-speed internet for only $10 a month, and they're selling laptops for $150 if that's something that people need, although I believe that DPS has generally been able to meet those needs, which is pretty wonderful. But anytime you're feeling guilt or shame as a parent during the pandemic, I want you to kind of think of this card. So, guilt and shame are are powerful and important emotions, right? We need them. They are there to keep us from doing stuff that's bad, right? Um, the difficulty with parents right now is that we've got no space, right? This is really out of our control, and we're not the ones who caused the pandemic. We're just dealing with the consequences. So guilt or shame are not going to really help you in being a better parent. If you do mess up, and we all mess up, it's a wonderful opportunity to show your kids the power of an apology, and a heartfelt one at that. But also, try to forgive yourself. Like it really is an incredibly tough time. And one of the things that I am trying to tell everybody in the trainings, no matter whether I'm talking to fellow physicians at work, or kids, or parents, or teachers, is if you're feeling really at the end of your rope, or you're struggling and kind of hanging on by a thread, I want you to try to think of that thread as kindness. And if there's nothing else you can do in that moment, try just to be kind. And then I think if we all kind of hold on to that we're definitely going to get through this together. It would be great if you, as expert parents, wanted to help each other about what has been working for you. And I also know that there's a pretty good chance that I didn't answer all of your questions, and it's possible I didn't answer any of your questions. So we can certainly move to that now. One question I know that I typically get from parents is, tell me about the parent monitoring sites, or how do I make sure that my kid is not doing anything that's unsafe. So I can give you my short answer now, and maybe that's not a question that you have, but just in case, or if somebody else asks you, one of the things that is true about technology now is that if a kid wants to hide something from their parent, there are many, many, many clever ways for them to do so. So I think as a parent, it's not as simple as saying, to your 5-year-old, no, you can't play in the street by yourself, right? That's not safe. But I think the same principles apply, in that as a parent, I think the most important thing is to have an open lines of communication with your child, so that you are finding out, what are they doing? Is there anything that's worrying you about what you're seeing online? Are your friends saying anything that's worrying you? They can always come. They can come and talk to me if they don't feel like they can talk to their parents. Kind of setting up this, hey, I'm here to help, talk to me, and what are you doing online? That kind of thing, I think, is a better general principle than kind of being big brother. In that way, and seeing every text and every photo and everything. You may not even have time to do that anyway, right? Because we've got a lot going on. So teaching judgment and keeping the lines of communication open. Definitely there are times when that's not safe for kids, and then you have to make different decisions. But if you're in that kind of a situation, I would definitely recommend trying to get some professional support from your school, or from your pediatrician, or from a mental health professional. Are there other questions?
Yeah, Dr. Anthony, helpful, and we do have quite a few coming up in the Q&A. So I will just start at the top here. You mentioned not setting screen time. Would it be reasonable to have kids not bring their phones to bed with them?
That's a great question. I recommend no screens in the bedroom at all. That's including computer, television, or iPad or phones. That is a health decision though. So I frame it that way with my kids. Although I have to tell you, in all honesty, my kid is doing his remote schooling in his bed in the morning. He doesn't even get out of bed. He basically just rolls over. And that's what happens when you turn the cameras off, right? But it hasn't been a problem, and that's in the morning. In the nighttime, those screens will put light out that can interfere with sleep. So the ideal, and this applies to us too as grown-ups, is to have no screens, especially computer or phone screens, an hour before bed. That ideal does not always happen. For sure, it even doesn't happen for me. I don't generally have sleep problems though, but it is better for them to stay out of the bedrooms in general.
Great. What would be a good length of time for a no screen time rule per day, I guess?
I mean, gosh, it depends on the day and what you as a parent need to get done kind of outside of your work and the other things you have to do. So I don't know that you really need to have a rule. I have generally said to my kids, make sure this isn't a problem, right? So if I call you to dinner, if I ask you to go walk the dog with me, if I say, hey, do you want to do something together, then let's generally try to get a yes in those situations, and then I'm not going to be worried about limiting screen time. I think if you can get 5 minutes of family time a day, that's better than 0 minutes. If you can get an hour, that's great, but there may be days where that's just not possible.
Very good advice. Absolutely. Here's one from about what about kids with ADHD?
Yeah, screens do not cause ADHD, so you can not worry about that. My older son does have ADHD, so all of the principles that I have been applying have certainly worked for him. He also, though, I will say, has always been really motivated by school, loves learning, and loves college now. His ADHD, honestly, between you and me, is why he's so successful at Colorado College, which has a block plan. Highly recommend that if you have kids with ADHD who want to go to college. But you may find with your kids or even your teens with ADHD that it is more difficult for them to disengage. Online learning sometimes can be really great for some kids with ADHD, but when you talk about those disorganization difficulties and all the different things to manage, it can also be really, really painfully hard. And you have probably figured out whether for your kids, whether your child is in the really great or in the painfully hard category. So I don't think there are any hard and fast rules for kids with ADHD and amount of screen time. But if your kid is having trouble succeeding in school or engaging in other ways, then that's a good time to reach out for help.
Great. here's another one. As a parent, I sometimes have a hard time setting boundaries with my own use. What are good ways to set limits on your own use so that you can model good behavior and be?
Yeah. So setting our own boundaries are hard. One of the things my mean phone tells me is how much screen time I spend on my phone. And there's something similar that I have at work, active, and that can sometimes be painful. So first, I would say, again, cut yourself some slack, right? But try to have some structured times during the day when you do put down your phone and interact with your kids. Um, it can be hard because kids, especially if they're feeling a lot of grief around the pandemic, it can be hard sometimes to engage them, but you might institute a rule like no phones at the dinner table if you're eating together as a family. And a lot of us seem to be eating together a lot more as a family. We certainly are. My kid is plays travel baseball. So usually every night we are driving to and from baseball practice. And that occurs generally over the dinner time. So we're eating together a lot more in the pandemic. And that has been a thing that's really nice. Sometimes we do it in front of the television if we are binge watching a show together as a family. And then it's funny, we have to, even while we're binge watching together, which I realize is a screen, but we have to then also have a no phone rule so that you're not dividing your attention, but it's really kind of family time together.
Awesome. The next question, can you talk more about having youth turn off their cameras during class? I always thought it made people feel more engaged and focused.
Yeah, if they can at least turn off self-view, that's really helpful. The difficulty is when their cameras are on, even if they can't see themselves, they're really monitoring what they look like. They're monitoring, like I told you, my son is doing school in his pajamas in bed. When it was cameras on, he was always at his desk, usually had a hat on because he wasn't very long out of bed, and would have pajama bottoms on, but not tops, right? Some of us are doing this at work as well. I think the more we can take off these demands these multiple demands from our kids, the better, because online learning is harder. And the fewer demands we put on our kids during online learning, and the fewer demands we put on ourselves as well, the easier it is to be successful. So one of the things that's hard about this video, this webinar, right, is your cameras are not shared. I have to just trust that you're out there and you laugh at my videos and my jokes and things, but I can't tell if you are, right? So it is harder for your teachers, your kids' teachers, if your kids' screens are not on, but I think it's generally easier for your kids. And some kids who love making YouTube videos and putting them up all the time, maybe it really helps them. And I'm not saying it's a universal rule, but.
Yeah, I think we have 4 more questions in the chat. So someone is asking, can I find the open school resources on Common Sense Media?
Yeah, I think it's actually called Wide Open School. If you Google that, I'm sharing my screen, so I don't want to do that. You can find them on Common Sense Media, but their website is also pretty great. It can be, there's so much there though, that you can pretty quickly feel overwhelmed, but yep, it's there. Also totally free. And I believe everything on there, particularly on Wide Open School, but I think pretty much everything is ad free. But perhaps that depends on your browser. I don't know.
Great. Marina is asking, what are your thoughts about blue light reducing glasses? Any research regarding these type of glasses?
Yeah, so when I talked about eye strain, I'm just telling you that I know this personally. So I have two things that are help. It's the dry eye stuff. It's dry here in Colorado anyway, but as your eyes are getting strained, they get drier, and if they're drier, then they get more strain. And these glasses that I have on, these are my computer glasses, and I have lighter glasses here for which are progressives because I'm old, but they are for kind of the rest of my life. And I do have the blue light filter. There is some suggestion that it helps. So I paid the extra, I mean, I think it was $50 for my glasses. But I wear glasses anyway. So I don't know that for my kid, I would get glasses just to have the blue light filter. I don't know that it is that strong. The research is that strong. I think it has been done more with people who are already wearing glasses.
Great. Okay, from Anonymous here, say Santa is bringing a Nintendo Switch. Do you think there need to be between parents and kids from the get-go? Like you need to read 15 minutes, take a walk outside before any.
You know, I mean, if you feel really strongly about that and think you can stick to it, I think that's fine. I would not be able to stick to it, particularly in a pandemic. I work too much, and I nag. My battles are all about other things. So I think it's really up to you and your parent values. There is no right answer to this. And if you decide you just want it to be a happy thing that they can use, you can present it with a, just make sure that it's not a problem. You know, if I give you a 5-minute warning for dinner, then, you know, be okay with turning it off, and then we don't have a problem. If you have no other way to get your kid to go on a walk with you, though, I will say, and you've tried other things to get that to happen, to get your kid to go on walks with you or to turn away from screens, then you can do that. I think even with something though, like getting a Nintendo Switch for Christmas, lucky kid, by the way, it can be, instead of making it a time limited thing, you can say, by agreeing to do this or doing these chores or being really helpful out of the blue, those kinds of things, you can give virtual money towards new games or something, because getting something is always more motivating than the risk of losing something. Hopefully that makes sense.
Sure does, yes. And then from Michael, how to block YouTube for my 5-year-old without blocking teachers' links?
Oh, yeah. That's hard. And that there are definitely some content blockers that are helpful on YouTube. But for a 5-year-old, I would say you probably need to just approve only certain channels, and leave it there so that your kid can kind of independently, even at 5, get through, you know, everything on this one channel, but not be able to get to other content. Obviously, with older kids, you don't have to work it that way. But for a 5-year-old who probably also, like, if you need to go to a work meeting, your 5-year-old then needs to be able to go through videos and things, which YouTube is really great about. Hopefully that makes sense. If that isn't enough help, I would ask somebody at your kid's school, because they're super expert at this, for sure.
Awesome. Here's one more coming in. Is screen time bad for kids with autism?
No, in fact, so a lot of my professional life is dedicated to kids with autism, and my kids with autism tell me over and over again that it is a lifeline. Um, so and just like with ADHD, there are no absolutes here, but it can be a lot easier for kids with autism to form friendships and really meaningful, helpful, wonderful relationships online. And that is the same principle as turning the cameras off, right? It's the whittling of the demands that can be really hard, like the social demands. So when you're interacting with kids live, there's a lot of other stuff going on that you have to filter out. There's more facial expressions, there's tone, there's body language, there's other kids around usually, or school demands, and kind of filtering all of those things out online, that with chatting or talking to somebody through the game mic can be a great way to build those social relationships without your child needing to delete out all of the other things. What can be difficult about technology in autism are things like turning it off, or needing to leave before a game is saved, or leaving a team game before it's over. That can be especially hard, just with flexibility. But I also try not to do that with my kid either, who's not autistic. It's just giving a warning and kind of protecting and cherishing that social time is really worth it for him. So I try to let him know kind of what's scheduled and when he needs to get off, or to do something like dinner or whatever.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all of the questions. So I just want to extend so much gratitude to you, Dr. Anthony, for coming and volunteering your time to share this wisdom with us. There have been some wonderful comments in the chat just thanking you. And I see that you put your email here as well for people to follow up and contact you. And also my teammate is going to put our email for the Prevention Services Department. If you would like to contact us, Leah, who's the contact for our team, and to talk about prevention, we can get these slides to you. And again, we bring up with an email to all of our participants as a thank you for being here with your great recording, as well as, are we able to share out your slides as well, Dr. Anthony?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And you are also able to take them and use them yourself if you want. Nothing here is proprietary to me at all.
We will get the word out to as many parents as we can. So this has been just wonderful and just very helpful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.